User warning. High chance of stuttering, pausing, misreading, and mispronouncing. Enjoy. Now that he was actually in the forest all on his own, the young child couldn't help but feel scared. He was excited, but he knew it was a long way to Volcano Rock City, and he wasn't exactly strong. For the first day, he just kept walking, occasionally checking the map to make sure he was on the right track. He tried to stay brave, but every time he heard a twig snap or a bird squawk, he flinched. He was scared, but he wanted to get to Volcano Rock City, to his home, so he kept going. He wasn't exactly a pro at navigating, but he found his way around by checking for landmarks on the map. Giant boulder, an oddly colored river, some weird trees, all the things that assured him he was going the right way. It was nearly sunset when he finally found a good cave to hide in for the night, big and sheltered enough to protect him from any unexpected rain. He gathered some twigs and arranged them into a pile, pulling out the flint from his bag and lighting it. He taught himself a thing or two about survival over the years. Wrapped up in his blanket, eating some of his berries with the fire blazing next to him, Branch felt relaxed. Eventually he laid down, using his bag as a pillow, and fell asleep. He woke up a few hours later. While it was still night, his fire had died down to a few embers and the moon was high in the sky. Branch couldn't figure out why he had suddenly woken up. He did have a problem with nightmares, but he couldn't remember having one, so why was he awake? He got his answer only a second later when he heard a deep growl coming from deeper in the cave. He slowly turned his head, his face frozen in fear, and came face to face with a pair of glowing yellow eyes. He yelped, grabbing his things as he leapt away, walking backwards to get away from the beast. It slowly crept further out of the shadows, revealing a large, furry creature. A wolf. A really big wolf. With glowing yellow eyes and sharp teeth. Bridge's eyes widened more, fear paralyzing him. He couldn't move. He knew he should, but he just couldn't. The wolf was still inching closer to him, baring its teeth. Branch was terrified, so he tightly shut his eyes, holding his bag close to his chest like a shield. His breathing was harsh as he waited for the inevitable pain or being hit or scratched, but instead he felt a wet nose push against his face and then move away. He slowly opened his eyes, and there, right in front of him, was the wolf. It was sitting a few inches from him, on its hind legs, with its head tilted to the side. Branch was stunned, but slowly moved his hand to wipe the wet spot from where it touched him with its nose. Branch was skeptical, but the giant wolf didn't seem to want to hurt him, so he let his guard down a little bit. He slowly put his backpack back on his back, his blanket back in his bag, and put it on his back. The whole time, the wolf just sat there, staring with sparkly eyes and a curious look. Branch, nervously, moved a bit closer. Then the wolf did too. Branch tilted his head to the side, mirroring the wolf, which seemed to make it happy as it immediately pounced on him and started licking his face. For a second, Branch thought that he had made the wrong decision and was going to die, but then let out an involuntary giggle as he realized what was happening. This went on for a good few seconds before Branch felt like his chest would explode from laughing so much. The wolf's tongue was really tickled. Okay, okay, thanks. You can stop now, he shouted, laughter still in his voice. Surprisingly, the wolf immediately backed off, going to sit on its hind legs and stare at Branch. Branch sat up and wiped off all the slobber, kinda grossed out. He still had a slight smile on his face as he moved closer to the wolf, hesitantly reaching out and petting its head. He leaned into the touch, a happy expression on his face. Branch couldn't help but coo a bit. "Aw, you're so cute," he whispered, mindful of the fact that it was still nighttime. Honestly, Branch was really relieved. He'd been convinced that he'd been a goner, which would have really sucked not only because he would have died, but also he would have been proving King Peppy right, which sounded just awful. Wolf's fur was soft and black as night. Honestly, now that he wasn't fearing for his life, Branch couldn't help but admire the beauty of the animal. "Do you have a name?" he asked, but immediately felt stupid as the wolf just tilted its head in confusion. Yet he doesn't know why he expected an answer. He stopped petting the animal and placed his hand on his chin and thought, something he'd picked up by seeing his grandma do it whenever she was pondering something. He was trying to think of a name for the wolf. Sure, he didn't know if the wolf would even stay with him, but it was here now, and he felt that it was right to name it. He looked at the wolf and determined that it was a girl based on the coloration of its eyes. He had read a lot of books on forest creatures, and he knew that only the female wolves had yellow eyes, whereas the males commonly had blue or gray. So, a girl's name. Maybe Night because of her dark fur. No, that was too simple. Such a beautiful, sweet creature deserved a better name. Banana because of her eyes? Yeah, no, that's even worse. He studied her closely, and then it came to him. Zinnia, he said, a smile growing a bit. The creeping zinnia is a beautiful yellow flower that grows in dense forests. The same calm yellow as the wolf's eyes. It's perfect. Your name's Zinnia, he told her, to which she yipped and nuzzled his face. He laughed again. It felt good to laugh, to smile. He was glad he'd found Zinnia. He just hoped she decided to stay. Branch and Zinnia played for a little bit. She'd instigated a wrestling match, but Branch could tell she was being gentle with him. Eventually, though, his 9-year-old body was too tired, and he walked back to the cave, fishing out his blanket. He fell asleep that night more content than he'd felt in a long while, with Zinnia wrapped around him. When he woke up in the morning, he was beyond relieved to still feel Zinnia curled around him. He'd been worried that she'd sneak off in the middle of the night. He knew she was a wild animal, and if she wanted to leave, then he wouldn't stop her, but he couldn't help but want her to stay with him. He liked having her around. He tried to carefully step away from her, but her eyes snapped open the second he moved and she nuzzled his face. He laughed a little and pushed her away. Good morning, he said as he fished his berries out of his bag, popping a few in his mouth before offering one to Zinnia. He didn't have many left, but he wanted to share it with his new friend. She sniffed it before her nose crinkled in disgust and she turned away from it, sitting up and exiting the cave. He popped it into his mouth and ran after her, worried he'd upset her, but she didn't go far. She gave him a look that he just knew meant stay here before she crouched down, her yellow eyes scanning the trees. He didn't know what she was doing, but he crouched down and stayed quiet. He just stayed like that for a minute, scanning the trees in silence before Zinnia suddenly jumped. He fell back in surprise, not having expected her to move, and saw as she pounced on something that he hadn't even seen. A pig. One of those big green ones that blend in with the forest. He saw her bite down on its neck, a vicious look in her eyes. It only took a few seconds before the pig went still, and Zinnia picked it up in her mouth and happily carried it back to Branch. He understood that she'd caught this for him, and he was grateful, but he couldn't help but cringe at the sight of all the blood spilling from its neck, turning the fur around Zinnia's mouth a dark and wet. Luckily, she seemed to sense his discomfort and quickly ran into the cave, dropping the pig on the ground and using her head to gesture towards the charred twigs. It was as if she was saying, Hurry up and cook it, then you won't have to see the blood. Brent smiled a bit, understanding that they both needed to eat, and quickly fished his flint from the bag. A few minutes later, the fire was lit, and Brent had managed to skewer the pig on a stick. He put some sticks in the little contraption around the fire that held the pig, and now he was simply watching it cook while Zinnia was rubbing her snout with her paws, trying to rid herself of the blood. He smiled again, truly glad to have found Zinnia. He also scoffed a little, unable to help but think about how a random wolf he'd met less than a day ago was nicer to and understood him better than the majority of his village. It was honestly sad. He always knew the way they treated him wasn't right. He was starting to realize that it was way worse than he thought. Zinnia seemed to sense his sadness, so she nudged his face with her, thankfully clean, snout. He sighed, petting her head. He just wanted to get to Volcano Rock City already. Within the next hour, the duo had eaten their fair share of pig, packed up, and were ready to get back on the road. Branch had checked the map again, even though by this point he had the whole thing memorized. They were still about a day away from Volcano Rock City, but Branch had hoped that they'd make it. He started walking and was happy when he saw that Zinnia was striding right next to him. He was worried she wouldn't follow, but she seemed content with staying by his side. That is until she realized that Branch had short little 9-year-old legs and was therefore pretty darn slow. She huffed in annoyance and, without warning, picked him up by the back of his vest and plopped him on her back. Like I said, she was a really big wolf. Maybe Branch was just tiny. He yelped in surprise and steadied himself so that he wouldn't fall off. He had not been expecting that. She gave him a goofy grin, tongue out and all, then started trotting at a quicker pace. Well, Branch couldn't say this was a bad thing. He was getting tired, and Zinnia's fur was so soft. He laid down, gripping her neck for and relishing the sheer softness of it. The rest of the day was spent like that. Branch on Zinnia's back, pointing her in the right direction every time she got off course. Occasionally stopped to hunt and cook an animal. It was more than he'd eaten in quite a while, and he had honestly forgotten how good a full tummy felt. At this rate, they were going to get there in half a day. A thought that left Brent excited. He couldn't wait to get to Volcano Rock City. But the closer they got, the more doubt started to creep in on the trolling. Who's to say his family was even still alive? He didn't know how his egg had gotten in that river all those years ago. Maybe something had happened to his parents, leaving his egg alone. The thought of his only remaining family also being dead filled him with dread and sadness. But even if they were alive, who's to say they would even want him? Maybe they'd had another egg and forgotten about him. Maybe they were moved on, happy, and him coming back would just ruin their lives. Maybe Peppy was right, and they weren't good people. With each thought that entered his mind, his mood just worsened more and more. He wanted a family. A loving, good family with a nice, safe home. Branch wanted to be happy. But what if he couldn't be? What if his place was no better than Pop Village? Branch was getting more nervous by the second. Suddenly Zinnia stopped and turned her head, looking at Branch directly in the eye. He held her stare for a second before she gave him a big lick on the cheek, which he laughed. Ew, Zinnia, that's so gross, he yelled, giggling a bit. He saw that she had a satisfied look on her face, and he smiled more. She was trying to cheer him up. He hugged her neck once again, tremendously grateful that he'd found her. It would be okay. Even if all his worries came true, he had Zinnia, Cooper, and he'd be able to find somewhere to call home. He'd be okay. Another hour passed by, and Branch noticed that the air felt hotter. Not unbearably so, but definitely more hot than he was used to. And then the trees cleared up and he saw it. Volcano Rock City. It was big. A lot bigger than he thought it would be. The ground ahead of him wasn't grass, but rather what Branch could only guess was hardened lava. There were rivers of molten lava flowing all around, with big stone bridges crossing over each one. Houses seemed to be carved into it, along with a bunch of stadiums and streets. At the very top stood a much larger house, more of a palace than anything, which Branch guessed it was. All in all, it looked pretty intimidating. He gulped and looked down at Zinnia, who just gave him another goofy smile. He sighed and patted her on the head. He wasn't sure whether or not he'd get in trouble for just waltzing in, but there weren't any walls or gates, nor guards, so he thought he'd take the chance. Zinnia started walking, and Brent was glad that her species of wolf was suited for hot weather. Otherwise, she would have burned her paws. That made him think, though. He was a rock troll, so is he about to step on it too? He had already noticed that the hot weather wasn't really bothering him, and it made sense that he'd also be suited for this kind of thing considering his heritage. Hesitantly, he told Zinnia to stop and hopped off her, and to his delight, wasn't burned. The ground felt hot, but it didn't hurt. Honestly, it felt kind of nice. He never really liked the cold. Now he got why. He wasn't built for it. He and Zinnia started walking towards the city. Once they made it inside the city, there were a lot of people. Trolls with dark skin and dark hair. Trolls with gray skin and dark hair. Branch felt himself smile a bit at that. He had always felt so out of place in Pop Village, even before he turned gray. His skin had been a lighter shade of gray, and his hair an extremely dark blue. He never had the colorful appearance that the rest of the village had. It had just been another thing that ostracized him from his peers. But these trolls all had light gray skin and dark colored hair. It made him feel a bit lighter. No one spared him a glance, though some people turned their gazes to Zinnia. They never stared for long and just went about their business. Another thing he found that he liked. In Pop Village, people always stared, whether they just did it shamelessly or out of the corner of their eye. Trolls were always judging him. But here, he could just walk around and everyone thought it was perfectly normal. His mood was lifted a bit by these revelations, but it turned sour again as the thought struck him. There were a lot of trolls here, way more than he thought there'd be. He thought it would be about the size of Pop Village and that if he asked around, he'd be able to find his parents. But this place was at least 3 times the size of his former village, and he wasn't sure how he was going to find his parents. He didn't know anything about them, not their names or their appearances, and he was starting to panic. He wanted to find them, but he didn't know how. Tears came to his eyes. Was this all a stupid idea? Sure, he was unhappy in Pop Village, but at least it was familiar. Here, he didn't know anyone or anything. He was never going to find his parents. More tears built up, and his ears were ringing. He was about to start hyperventilating when suddenly a warm hand landed on his shoulder. He looked up, startled, only to see a rock troll looking at him with concern. She had dark purple hair with white streaks tied up in 2 pigtails and a black leather vest with pins and rips in it. Her eyes were a dark red, and she was looking at him with concern and pity. "Hey, buddy, what's up?" she asked, her voice taking on a bayish tone. Usually, Branch would have been upset at being treated like a baby, but he was panicking too much to really care. She looked nice, and she was asking him what was wrong, so, against his better judgment, he told her, I I was looking for my parents, but I don't know where they are, he cried, and felt Zinnia nuzzling his neck. Aw, you lost your parents? She questioned, and Brent saw that she'd misunderstood. He took a deep breath, trying to control his sobbing so he could give her a clear answer. No, I don't know who they are. I came here from Pop Village because their king told me that I was actually a rock troll, and I honestly really hated it there. So we came here to try and find my parents, but it was so stupid because I have no idea who they are. He started sobbing again, big fat tears rolling down his face. He usually didn't show any. He usually didn't show emotion so openly, especially not to strangers. But the past few days had just been so emotional and chaotic that he couldn't find the energy to hold back his tears. The girl, who he knew looked about 14, looked shocked at this. However, she quickly took away her shocked expression and once again looked worried. Oh, damn. I'm sorry, kid. Hey, how about this? What if I helped you find them? She suggested, and Branch looked up at her. Really? He asked, and she smiled. Yep, there's a lot of trolls here, but I'm sure we could do it, she said, and picked him up without warning. He yelped, his whole body stiffening. He did not like being touched so suddenly. She soon realized that fact as she quickly set him down. Oh, sorry, I probably should have asked first. It's just this palace is really crowded, and you're pretty small, so I thought it'd be good to carry you so you don't get lost. So I should ask, though. Real sorry about that, she said, looking genuinely apologetic. Branch sighed, forcing his body to relax. It's fine. I just don't like being touched without warning. I guess you're right, though, he said. He honestly didn't like the idea of being held by a stranger, but she seemed nice enough, and Zinni was obviously tired from carrying him so long, so he allowed her to pick him up again. Once he was safely in the girl's arms and Zinni was by her side, they started walking down the crowded street. So, I forgot to ask, what's your name? She asked. Branch, what's yours? He questioned. Mine's Val, she answered. So, Branch, do you know anything about your parents? Val questioned, to which Branch shook his head. No, I don't even know if they're alive. I have no clue why Meg was found floating in the river all alone. Anything could have happened. Honestly, they could be dead and this whole trip could have been for nothing, he explained, a sad look on his little face. Val looked at him in sympathy. Well, look on the bright side. Even if they are gone, you still made it back to what was supposed to be your home. The stupid king hadn't taken it from you. I'm sure you'll find a good life here, even if it's not with your parents. She tried to reassure him, but he just nodded with the same dejected look. She sighed. Honestly, she wanted to help this little kid, but one thought wouldn't get out of her mind. The story she'd heard a million times growing up with Barb. The story the princess had always told to Val, with tears streaming down her face. The story of how her sweet baby brother's egg had been stolen by bandits just a few days before he was due to hatch. How she and her father had searched for weeks to try and find him to no avail. How she wished more than anything that she could have her little brother back. Could this kid really be the missing prince? Hey, kid, how old are you? She asked Branch. I just turned 9 a few months ago. Why? He answered. Well, the timelines added up. The 9-year anniversary of the prince's appearance had been a few months ago, and as she looked at the kid, she couldn't help but notice that he looked a good bit like King Thrash and Barb, and even the late Queen. Of course, he had no colors, which made her heart go out to him, but the structure of his face, the way his eyes were shaped, the dim but still visible amaranth color of them all reminded Bella of the royal family. Seriously, had she just picked up the long-lost prince off the street? Had he been alive this whole time, stolen away by the pop trolls? And if so, why? He'd been stolen by bandits, but why would bandits steal the prince only to drop his egg in the river and leave? If they wanted him dead, wouldn't they have made sure the job was done? Did they have another goal? Or were they just really stupid bandits? Val shook her head as if to shake the thoughts out of her mind. There was no point in thinking through all of this if she didn't even have proof that this kid was the missing prince. But luckily, she knew of a way to prove whether or not her line of thinking was right. Hey, kid, I think I might know who your family is, she said, and his head snapped up to look at her with shock. What? You do? How? He yelled, not having expected her to say something like that. Well, don't get your hopes up, since I could totally be wrong, but you just remind me of them. The way you look, the story of how you got found by the pop trolls, it all lines up pretty damn well. I actually know of a surefire way to prove whether or not I'm right, but like I said, I could be wrong, so don't get too excited till I know for sure, she explained, and the sad look that Branch was sporting quickly turned one of excitement and joy. Yeah, the kid was totally getting his hopes up. Belle really hoped she was right. They made their way through the streets and into the royal palace, which was luckily empty since the royals were out judging some music contest in the South Stadium. Val, being a good friend of Barb's, was allowed to go into the palace as she pleased, so no one really batted an eye at her. Some even said hello. Branch, on the other hand, was super confused. Why are we going into the palace? He asked, not understanding what this had to do with finding his family. Well, the way to prove whether my theory is right is an item in this palace. It's a really special item, and I'm not technically allowed to touch it, but it's the only way to prove who you are. Wait, but won't we get in trouble? Branch asked, worried. Bella chuckled and cooed at him. You're adorable. Don't worry, we won't get caught. And even if we do, this place is all about breaking rules. Rules are meant to be broken is literally our motto. So it won't be a big deal, she explained, which calmed Branch down a bit. They made their way through the castle, and eventually stopped at a big metal door. This is the room that holds the item. You need a special code to get in, but I happen to have that code, she said, grinning down at a nervous Branch. He didn't feel right breaking all these rules, but Val did say that the Soul King's motto was rules are meant to be broken, so he tried to just go with the flow. Zinnia nudged his hand again, which helped him relax a bit more. Val used her free hand to put in the code, and the door slowly swung open to reveal a dark room, only slightly illuminated by a weird, glowing red string. Branch gaped at the string, having never seen anything like it. He could just feel the power radiating off of it. Belle smiled at his awe. She remembered feeling the exact same way the first time she saw it, when Barb decided that showing her their kingdom's most prized possession, along with the code to get it, was a good idea. Bella chuckled a little at the memory, and then finally set Branch on the ground. Branch blinked in surprise. He'd honestly forgotten that he was being held. It had felt kind of nice, normal, to be carried around like that. He kind of wanted Belle to pick him up again, but he'd rather snort glitter than admit that, so he just stayed quiet. Alright, so this thing is pretty important, so you gotta be careful. I'd explain the whole thing to you, but it'd take a while and it's pretty complicated, so all I'm gonna say is that if that thing glows super bright whenever you touch it, then I'm right in about who your family is, and I'll take you to them. But if you touch it and nothing happens, then I was wrong and we'll figure something else out. Got it? She explained, and Branch nodded. Glow good? No glow bad. In reality, the string only glows brighter under the touch of someone with royal rock blood. So if it glowed, then this kid really was the lost prince. But she didn't want to tell him that yet. So she just stayed silent and crossed her fingers as Branch approached the string. He was a bit skeptical, but Zinnia was just sitting a few feet away with a happy look on her face, so Branch knew this couldn't be dangerous. He just really hoped the string would glow. He stood in front of it, his breath taken away by the power flowing off of it. He needed this thing to glow. He took a deep breath and reached his hand forward, gently placing his hand on it. In an instant, the room was flooded with a bright red light, and Branch fell back in shock. It had glowed. The string had glowed really bright. Val let out a squeal of excitement and picked Branch up again, twirling him around. I was right. I know who your family is. Oh my god, I'm so happy. She squealed, and Branch couldn't help but smile as well. He had family. He didn't really get to know how that glowy string proved it, but Val seemed very sure that this meant she knew who his family was, and he was choosing to trust her. Branch had a family, and he was going to get to be with them. He smiled brighter than he had in a long time, and unbeknownst to him, a streak of his hair regained its dark blue. His eyes even got a bit more colorful. After a few minutes of smiles and excited yips from Zinnia, Val was once again carrying him through the castle, except this time she was carrying him towards where she said his family would be. Val, what's my family like? He asked, wanting to know what kind of trolls his family were. Oh, they're just the most incredible people. Your dad is so kind and cool, and definitely the strongest person I know. And he breaks his sister. She's the same age as me. She's literally the most radical troll in the whole world. She's so hardcore and kind of intimidating, but she turns the sweetest troll in the land when she's around people she loves. I've been her best friend for years, so I can assure you she's really great. Val said, excitement in her voice. Brent smiled softly, happy to know that they were good people. And my mother? He asked, having noticed that Val didn't mention her. Val's expression turned sad. Sorry, kid, but she died a long time ago. She was an amazing woman, though. Strong, brave, and so freaking pretty. She loved you a lot, she said, her voice ticking on a softer note at the end. Rich's smile faded a little. His mother was dead. He would never get to meet her. He felt like he wanted to cry. Yeah, he had wanted to meet his parents, so to find out that he'd never get to even see one of them really hurt. Zinnia whined a little, sensing his sadness, and Brent shook his head. He was sad for his mother, but he still had a father and a sister. He hadn't even thought about the fact that he might have siblings, but the way Val described her, she sounded amazing. He couldn't wait to meet his family, even if one of them wasn't there. Val smiled, seeing Branch come to terms with it all so quickly. She didn't miss the blue strand of hair, nor the brighter eyes. She was so happy about this whole situation. Barb had always been so sad about her brother's disappearance. Now she was going to have him back. Both rock trolls' hearts felt a good bit more full as they made their way to the South Stadium, ready to meet the Royals. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. Hope you enjoyed. The amount of times I had to stop just so I could catch my breath, or because I messed up, was immense. If you all have a good day at noon or night, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this. And, yeah. You guys have no idea how many times I had to extend the photo so that it wouldn't, because it was giving me so much anxiety. I love you guys. Bye.